Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Muhammad Shafiq bin Burhanuddin, and in this episode of Nazrah, we will continue our discussion with Datuk Dr. Syed Tawfiq al-Attas on the solutions to some of our most urgent problems in the present-day Muslim world. He was formerly the Director General of the Institute of Islamic Understanding Malaysia at the appointment of Prime Minister of Malaysia, and subsequently he was the advisor at the Al-Bukhari Foundation Malaysia. Datuk, just now you were mentioning about many of the root problems of the Muslims, really, that many of the predicament that we see in the realm of in the religious leadership, politics and economics. Of course, it pertains to corruption of knowledge you mentioned, and even in the although in the realm of our financial institutions, we have the Sharia Board of Advisors, but there are many things that are they are overlooked in that regard, and there are plenty of room for improvement. I mean, can you perhaps share your thoughts in terms of what ought to be our collective strategy, perhaps? I mean, of course, the solution, and you have spoken about this, and your father, your eminent father, Professor Dr. Syed Muhammad al-Attas, have spoken about this long time ago, since the 70s, about the centrality or importance of higher education to resolve a lot of this problem. Can you share us your views about what ought to be the way forward now?
Well, I mean, if you want to fix something, it has to be done from the top down,
right?
Not from the bottom up.
Okay.
And in this case, when we are talking about education, it has to be from higher education.
Yes.
And of course, we have had experience in this because we have established, my father did establish the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization in the late 80s.
Okay.
But then, again, because of political interference, they interfered and they've decided to destroy it.
Okay.
And now it does not exist anymore.
Okay.
And this is a big tragedy, even though they have, I mean, when I say they, I'm talking about the politicians and politics.
Okay.
Even though they have the means to restore something which was beneficial, something which was good for them as well.
Yes.
They've chosen to do the opposite, to destroy.
Right.
But this is the way of ignorance. This is the way of arrogance.
Yes.
And this is what we suffer from. If politicians would steer clear of things that they knew nothing about, for instance, don't start talking about Islam, the theology, Islam, the religion. You don't know. That's not your job. Your job is as an administrator.
Yes.
And if you were to administer things in their just manner, you wouldn't see the problems we are having today. I mean, education is a big element when it comes to how to revive or how to go forward, the way forward. It's education. Everyone says this. Education, 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 education. Yes. What type of education? Higher education to begin with. It's from higher education that you can get knowledge as to how to develop a curriculum.
Right.
It's from higher education that you come with innovation.
Right.
It's from higher education that you get inventiveness.
Sure.
If you don't have a proper higher education system, which we don't, you are not going to be innovative. You are not going to be inventive. You are not going to be successful. You are not going to come up with new curriculums.
Right.
I mean, Malaysia has been using a higher education board, what do you call it? A higher education board to examine the curriculums, to examine how to make the public schools better.
Yes.
And they've been doing this for decades.
Sure.
Where are the results? It means there's something wrong. Something's not right.
Okay.
Could it be the constitution of the people in this board that don't know what they're doing?
Yes.
Could it be the fact that the politicians behind this are not supportive?
Yes.
Could it be that they are not interested? I get the feeling that we are really not interested. I don't think the politicians and politics in this country is really genuinely interested in higher education. If they were, why would you cut the budget of the universities? It's very important to keep the budget. And now you pretend as if, no, universities have to be self-subsistent. They've got to be like Harvard. I mean, for God's sake, Harvard is a very old university.
Right.
It has a very long tradition. You first have to have a tradition. We don't even have a tradition yet because of the interference of politics.
Okay.
We can't even start a tradition. Once we start a tradition, the interference comes and it's destroyed. Hence, ISTAC,
I see.
the International Institute of Islamic Thought and Civilization. There was a tradition, but when you start interfering, you put your fingers into it, you start thinking that you're going to have to regulate things, become politically controlling. This is what happens. It destroys it.
Yes. I mean, perhaps Datuk, that perhaps there are other ways to resolve this predicament. Perhaps we should transcend the local government or politics and perhaps build this based on support of international Muslim community or international community of scholars and businessmen. So that's why perhaps, I suggested earlier, that's why I was interested to know more about how OIC could play a role. Perhaps it should be a neutral body.
No, I understand that, but
yes.
I mean, to do anything, education and research is not cheap.
Sure.
You need money.
Okay.
The OIC is limited when it comes to funding.
Okay.
They're very limited. I've asked the OIC before.
I see.
I think they said that their maximum was $5 million.
I see.
You can't do anything with that. I mean, what we are talking about is something that will cost 100 million, 200 million to sustain for the next 10 years.
Right.
200 million ringgit.
Right.
$50 million. That would be the bare minimum to sustain for the next 10 years. Okay. That is without any kind of research, without any kind of development.
Right.
And research and development costs money. You can't think that you're going to invest a certain amount of money into research and development and expect results. You are lucky if 10% of your money is returned from the results of the research. That will be lucky.
Sure.
You can never expect a certain amount of investment in R&D to pay you back in full. It's not going to happen.
Right.
Like I said, 10% of the time the research and development is successful. And that is a very generous figure, actually, I think. Therefore, it's not as simple as get the collective ummah to do it, because, again, you need money and you need political will.
I see.
I mean, even if you had the money in Malaysia,
Yes.
you would have political interference, unfortunately. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
The politics should stay out of things that they don't know.
Sure.
They are contributing to this corruption of knowledge. They know very little about a certain subject, and yet they talk as if they know a lot.
Datuk, perhaps for our younger audience to be better informed, can you share with us your vision and perhaps your father's vision of how the education ought to be for Muslims in this country or globally? I mean, you speak of proper education. Can you
Yeah, well, I mean, proper education. I mean, we are not talking about a proper Islamic education vis-a-vis sekolah tahfiz or this madrasah type of thing of the past.
Right.
Although the madrasah system in the past was much better than this tahfiz today.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
The madrasah was an invaluable system actually before.
Okay.
But for instance, if your children in the past, if they wanted to know how to read the Quran, how to have some hadith,
Yes.
how to know some akhlaq,
Yes.
they were normally sent to the madrasah
Yes.
or to the mosque.
Yes.
And at the mosque, they would have this person, they would generally call them labai, to come and teach these very basic things.
Sure.
Later on, when you get to a higher education, then you can start delving deep into the theological aspects of things.
Right.
But for now, you need to have a proper, solid foundation, which means you need to know how to read at least the Quran.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Not start reading the Quran to learn Arabic.
Right.
You read the Quran because that's the Quranic language is different from the Arabic language.
Right.
I mean, I don't mean different in terms of its structure, it's the same,
Sure.
but the meanings are different.
Meaningless.
This is your primary education.
Okay.
But in terms of our primary education as well, you don't start teaching them philosophy in primary school.
Okay.
But they are doing this here. And then you say, well, how? Philosophy, you're thinking maybe Aristotle, Plotinus. No. When you start saying that we are going to teach them the theory of evolution
Okay.
in science,
Yes.
and you're talking about pure science,
Yes.
already there's a corruption there. Again, corruption of knowledge.
Right.
Because on the one hand, the pure sciences discuss the phenomenological. the physical. These are the pure sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics.
Yes.
And yet you are inserting a theory of evolution, which is part of the philosophy of science.
Right.
And it's still a theory. Then because of that, you'll have the other group of people who will say, well, if you're teaching theory of evolution in science, you need also creationism. Again, that's a philosophy. It should be in the philosophy of science. You don't teach a young mind philosophy. Right. They are not ready for this. Right. And therefore, your curriculum also has to be thinking about these kind of things. How do we change our curriculum? It's not a difficult thing to do. You teach the pure sciences. Yes. You don't teach philosophy of science. Right. You begin also teaching logic in school from a very young age. And the Malays in the past, they did that. Right. The Malays in the past would impart this kind of logic onto their children with pantun.
I see.
The Malay pantun.
Yes.
You know, the Malay pantun was always the logic of consequence.
Okay.
If, then, if, then, if, then.
Right. That's right.
It was always that.
Yes.
And that trained the young mind to think of more higher higher plane of thought later on in life, because now they already had the foundations of logic, the training for logic. And then from there, the pantun, if then kind of thing, it's the logic of consequence, like I said.
Yes.
Then you move on to the basic mathematics. These are all modern formal logic. Mathematics is also a logical thing.
Sure.
But it comes with a language too. And they learned this from them when they were young.
Okay.
But when we start destroying the Malay language, which is what we are doing today, we are corrupting and we are de-Islamizing actually, because we are beginning with the language.
Right.
We are corrupting the Malay language. And who is doing this? Again, politicians and politics. They are the ones responsible once again for corrupting the Malay language. Right. Now we are changing it. It's no longer Malay language. Now you might as well call it Malayanized English or Anglicized Malay. Which one is it? When they speak, they don't speak Malay actually, they're speaking English.
Yes.
And this is what they're doing. We are not saying that English language is a very bad thing. No, of course not. English language is an international language.
Yes.
We should be teaching our children English language.
Yes.
We should be teaching them subjects in English, because a lot of the reference works are in English.
Yes.
There shouldn't be all this problem about which one to teach it in. Science should be taught in English or Malay.
Yep. Yes.
Why is there such a big problem? There should be a choice given. If you want to learn it in Malay, okay, fine, learn it in Malay. But make sure that you know what you are talking about in Malay.
Yes.
But that's not the case. In English, you look at the sciences in English, a lot of the definitions in sciences in English are done from the Latin.
Right.
Some of them still have the Latin terms with them, like biology, for instance.
Sure.
In classification, all of the terms are Latin terms.
Right.
How do you Malayanize that?
Yes.
You have not done any research, precisely because you are only spending 0.8% of your GDP on research and development. This is the kind of money we're talking about.
Datuk, can you tell us, I mean, yes, you touched quite at length about the importance of having more education for research. What ought to be the priority? I mean, apparently many of our universities are giving priorities to research, but again, funding. But assuming they have the funding, what research ought to be the priorities in our...
No, I disagree actually. Our universities don't have the funding for research. A lot of the professors are very upset, and they were complaining about not having enough money to do their research.
Right.
There are lots of able, capable people in our universities who want to do research and who are doing useful, beneficial research. But because of the budget cuts, they themselves can't keep up.
I see.
And like I said, research is not something that you're going to expect the results that you want. You can't say to the professor or the associate professor or the lecturer, whatever it is, you can't tell him, look, I want results, like a production line. You must write X amount of books a year. You can't simply tell them that. They have to conduct their research. And the research takes time. We are not writing speeches for the government.
Yes.
We are not writing papers for the government where they want it in 3 days or in 2 days or in 1 day or an hour. We're not doing that. We're doing actually research which takes time. And therefore, not being a production line, we need to have a budget. We need to have money. the government must pay for the universities in this country. That would be Islamic, to pay for the universities, because education is one of those things which you have to have as far as Islam is concerned. And because your country's wealth is being split like a pie, putting allocation budget here and there, you should put your budget back to the universities.
I see. How do you feel about perhaps this issue of funding has to do with how we understand the economic system today ought to operate? Perhaps there are lessons that we should try to draw from and try to reenact into this context pertaining to the Islamic economic system in the past. When we talk about waqf, when we talk about the whole economic philosophy and practices in the past, perhaps this sort of thing can be revived to try to alleviate some of these issues that you speak of.
You're right.
Yes.
You're right. It could be.
Yes.
I mean, how much have we done on Islamic finance? How much work has been done on it?
Right.
I mean, I know there's quite a number of things being done on Islamic finance, on Islamic economics, but still, what we know pales in comparison to what the West is doing.
I see.
I'll give you an example.
Yes.
In the early days, when the spread of Islam was very active, it was very quick, very fast. The spread was very quick and very fast because, partly because of the translation movement.
I see.
What these Muslim scholars were doing, they were translating lots of works from the Greeks primarily into Arabic.
Yes.
And these works were then disseminated.
Yes.
Other scholars would come because they would love to learn.
Yes.
Baghdad became the center of learning because the scholars were there.
Yes.
They were the ones doing the translation works. They were the ones writing. Nishapur was there. All these places in the Muslim world.
Right.
They began with this translation movement. They were thirsty for knowledge.
Right.
Now let's look at today. According to figures, the country of Spain, they translate 300,000 books from other languages into Spanish,
Right.
and from Spanish into other languages.
Right.
300,000 a year,
Okay.
they do that.
Okay.
The whole of the OIC, the whole of the Muslim countries,
Okay.
they translate collectively 100,000. 193, that's the OIC, isn't it? 193 countries.
Yes.
193 countries only translate 100,000 works, and these are Islamic countries. And yet Spain does 300,000. How do we expect to once again rediscover our past if that's what we're doing?
Right.
We don't care about books anymore. This has been said again by the government, by our government, that we don't care. Everything should be online. Everything now is IT. Books are irrelevant.
Right.
This is what they say.
Right.
Now you can see already, look at today's day and age, that the internet is unreliable.
Right.
I mean, of course, the internet is also a very marvelous tool.
Yes.
Once again, thanks to the scientists.
Sure.
It's a marvelous thing that you can get information at the touch of a finger.
Sure.
But how are you going to be convinced that what you are getting there is true?
Yes.
Now there's a talk about fake news, there's a talk about fake information on the internet. This is not to be believed. Politicians will tell us this. When it doesn't suit them, they'll say this.
Okay.
But that's true. There are a lot of things on the internet which are not reliable.
Sure.
Now, if you're going to say this, and you're going to say everything should be on the internet, how do you know the reliability of these things that you read on the internet? You have to have the physical copy itself. If you're doing research in a higher institution of learning,
Yes.
and you research something, let's say you research hadith on the internet,
Okay.
that's well and good. Research the hadith on the internet. You'll get the hadith.
Okay.
But you always have to go back to the source. In other words, you have to go back to the book to confirm that that is what it says.
Right.
And yet, we are not paying attention to this. We don't care about books.
Right.
Look at IKIM's library. It has stalled.
Yes.
Look at our universities in this country. Their budget for buying books and expanding their libraries have been severely curtailed.
Yes.
More emphasis now is on the internet. In our primary schools, just now you were talking about, we are doing a lot of scientific things in the primary schools. Now we're pretending to go towards what they call STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Yes.
How successful is that? I didn't see a very glowing report just a few months ago about STEM.
Right.
But what about history? Oh yes, our politicians will say it's very important, history is very important, but what history? According to whom?
Yes.
What they mean is political history which benefits them.
Right.
But that's not what we are talking about. We are actually talking about the passage of history where we can actually learn something. But up to this point, what we have learned from history is that we have learned nothing from history.
Yes.
This is what we have done.
Yes. Datuk, I mean, perhaps you could shed light further. I mean, from what I gather from you, I suppose one of the pressing strategies or pressing action that ought to be taken is perhaps placing people in their proper places. I mean, like you said, even your distinguished father's pursuit in establishing or maintaining this very important institute called ISTAC was interfered. I mean, and you seem to suggest that there are capable, reliable professors or academicians who can do the job. But how do you suggest, supposing that the politicians, they are willing to consider your suggestion, and I mean, where do they begin? Should they retrain themselves? Should there be more kind of discourses with the academicians, with scholars such as yourself? What do you suggest ought to be there? Yeah.
We've had discourse with the government. I have had discourse with the government.
Okay.
I've had discourse with people in the government. They're not interested because they think, I'm speaking personally, because they think that I would be bad for them. Because I don't, if I don't think that they are doing something which is right, I will tell them.
Yes.
They don't like that, of course.
Sure.
I mean, we have become like the general population of the Arabs. Education is a bad thing. This is how we have become. A little bit of education is dangerous for the politician. And this is the problem. I mean, it's easy to say that we can just retrain, read this, read that, but it's not that easy when you actually think about it, because it's not something that you can do overnight.
Sure.
I mean, this country has been independent now for 60 years.
Yes.
Have we gotten better from the time we gained independence, or have we gotten worse? On the one hand, we would say yes, as far as infrastructure, as far as development, of course, that's a very limited definition of development as well.
Right.
We are talking just simply about infrastructure. Have we become better? There would be some who would say yes.
Yes.
There would be some who would say, no, we are lacking this, we are lacking that.
Right.
But that one we can add on later. But then, what about the mental education? What about the spiritual education? Have we become better or worse?
Right.
Now we have to look at our condition today, our state today. If our akhlaq, if our culture has been eroded, if our akhlaq has gone down, how can we say we become better? If we start becoming more conscious of the way we dress, just to be like part of the masses,
Right.
that is a herd mentality. That's not a conscious decision that you make on your own. It's the part of the herd mentality, that you have to dress a certain way, you have to do this a certain way, you can't do this, you can't do that, then there's more haram, more halal. I mean, look, it's ridiculous. In today's time, I mean, if you were to just go back 50 years or 60 years or even 70 years, I don't think you would find this many fatwas on what is haram, what is halal as they do today. You go to the mosque on Friday prayers.
Right.
The khatib is supposed to stand up there and he's supposed to be conscious of himself and realize that he is supposed to represent the Prophet,
Yes.
Prophet Muhammad. Yes?
Yes.
He's not supposed to stand up there and condemn one person, condemn one organization, condemn one group. Prophet never did that.
Right.
He's not supposed to go up there and start talking nonsense. He's not supposed to go up there and start talking politics.
Yes. How do you feel about the ulama in the other parts of the Muslim world? I mean, they too speak of a renewal. I mean, even I believe the scholars in al-Azhar, and then, for instance, there are positive developments in North America. We have the first Muslim college, the Zaytuna College. I mean, you see that there are pockets of or small groups of scholars, traditional scholars, who will try to to strengthen the unity and try to address this problem at the root.
Yes, I mean, yeah, of course. There are efforts being done, no doubt.
Yes.
There are scholars who are doing these efforts.
Yes.
But where are the scholars who are going to talk about how to move forward, what we need to do, how do we have to educate ourselves, what do we need for education?
Right.
Where are those people? Where are the ones who can come to a government and say, this is not our education curriculum, it should be like this? Where are they? I'm not talking about the ones who are saying, well, we should go and start teaching Arabic of the Quran in school. That's nonsensical. I mean, we should start thinking about how our curriculum should be developed. Where are those people talking about this? I mean, I have ideas about how to do this, but I'm not about to say this now.
Okay.
Because I know how they are. I mean, today we have those people, isn't it? We have the ones who will steal your ideas without acknowledging.
Right.
And then they will try to implement what they think belongs to them.
Yes.
And then when they fail, they'll say, well, you see, your idea doesn't work.
I see.
After they've stolen it and claimed it for themselves.
Yes.
Which is what happens all the time.
Datuk, before we end, perhaps if there's, you could share with us one advice before we conclude, in particular to the Muslim youth. I mean, we are, I suppose, more cognizant of the issues that you speak of, although you have much more experience. So if there's one thing that you would advise to the Muslim youth in terms of their mental state of mind, in terms of their attitude, so that they could progress much better than their forefathers, please.
I think the Muslim youth, they need to impress upon their politicians and the political leaders that they are not going to sit down and take this lying down. That they want proper education.
Yes.
That they want to have dynamism.
Yes.
They want to be innovative.
Yes.
And in order to do this, they need to impress upon them to give them the resources. I don't mean just in terms of the funding or the capital, in terms of also the professional level and the skill that can be imparted upon them by people like us, people who know what we are talking about.
Yes.
Not simply just, the political panderers. Don't confuse Islam with Muslim. Islam is one thing.
Yes.
This is a religion. This is the name of religion practiced by the Muslims. But Muslim behavior should not be a considering factor to blame the religion.
Right.
Because the religion, this is what language does to you.
Right.
The Western world has always been trying to use this word Islamic people, the Islamic this, Islamic that. And they always use the word Islamic.
Right.
And this is done on purpose.
Right.
Because when you emphasize this word, like when you say Islamic people, the emphasis now is not on the Muslim. You are emphasizing the religion.
Right.
But it's done on purpose.
I see.
Islamic this, Islamic that. It's always like that. Instead of saying clearly the Muslims. And it's true. Muslim youth today should realize that the Muslims today are predominantly the ones who are actually the focus of the world's attention, are predominantly the extreme. Yes. The extreme groups. And don't think that the extreme groups are simply the ones who have the turban on, the long jalabiyah, the ones with the tasbih. These are the extremists. You can recognize them just by sight.
Right.
Don't think that, because that's only one side of the coin. Remember, there's another side.
Yes.
The other side is the ones who are deficient.
Right.
They are also extremists. The ones who are way thinking that everything should be secularized.
Right.
We don't mean that in terms of secular, when we say secularized, we don't mean that everything should be this worldly. No, we don't mean that primarily. We mean that the way that their mentality is shaped, again, through the language.
Right.
Be very careful of the language. The Malays should understand, especially the Malay of today, the Melayu Baru of today. The Melayu Baru, they are the ones who are in a very sorry state. This is why I'm careful. We're not going to say the Malays. The Melayu Baru are the ones who are causing the problems.
Right.
Not the Malays, the Melayu Baru. These are the arrogant group. These are the ones who are changing the language, changing the mentality, trying to dictate their will on others.
Right.
These are the extremists. Be careful of them.
Thank you very much, Datuk. We really appreciate your time of sharing us your thoughts, your experience, your wisdom. We really hope, especially those of my generation, that persons like yourself will continue to speak to us and to continue to counsel us. Inshallah, we hope to have you again in this show.
Inshallah. I mean, this is a very short show, actually. We could speak some more.
Yes.
In fact, there are other issues to talk about, especially with regards to history, with regard to world history.
Yes, yes.
But because the time is very short, we can only condense our thinking into a very short space. But I thank you very much for your invitation. I thank IKIM as well.
Thank you, Datuk. Inshallah, we hope that we can continue to benefit from you so that we together we can improve our future for the better. Thank you once again for joining us on Nazrah. Till then, wabillahi tawfiq wal hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.